This is video 3 of week 7, and we keep discussing about the relationship of multilingualism or monolingualism for that matters, and the cognition, the cognitive abilities, the intelligence, if you want, of their speakers. Okay, so this notion that multilinguals might present some more flexibility in their thinking has been taken up by recent studies. So in this one that I'm presenting to you here that made the press actually, let's look at what they did. So they took pictures of ordinary scenes and they asked groups of either monolingual or bilingual speakers to describe what they were seeing. And in this particular study, there were English-German bilinguals versus either monolinguals in English or monolinguals in German. Okay, so in English, we would say something like the men are walking in this picture. In German, you would say something the equivalent in German as the men walk towards the car, because you always have an endpoint in walking when you speak German. It's just a grammatical requirement. Okay. Now, when they show this to bilinguals and they were also artificially activating one of their languages, and you do that by talking to them in that language in the experimental setting, or making them talk to a person that they associate with a particular language, so either English or German, right? So when when it was artificially activated, that they would be in monolingual mode on one language or the other, bilinguals behaved according to which language was artificially activated. Okay, so bilinguals seem to exhibit distinct behavior depending on the language of operation that they were mobilizing in that moment. Okay, they say something like this, the authors. They say the worldview assumed by a German speaker is a holistic one. They tend to look at the event as a whole with an endpoint and so forth, where English speakers tend to zoom in on the event and focus only on the action. So the authors went from the production, the linguistic production of the subjects, to how to make conclusions, to draw conclusions about how the subjects perceive the world. If you remember, this is very much a Sapirian, Worfian view of things, that the language that you are, in this case, mobilizing, if you want, is determining your vision of the world, your perception of the world, the selection of items or properties of the world that you make given a particular language. Okay, now another experiment that I want to review, also quite recent as for science goes, is this one on emotions. Okay, this one on Finnish English bilinguals versus either Finnish monolinguals. Actually, they only took Finnish monolinguals, right? And the authors studied how the choice of language affected the emotions of the speakers, right? And they concluded things like this, and these were emotions in this case, how parents talk to their children. And they say bilingual parents may use a specific language to express an emotional concept because they feel that language provides better cultural context for expressing the emotion. These are the bilingual children. For example, a native Finnish speaker, a mother or a father, a native Finnish speaker may be more likely to use English to tell her children that she loves them because it is uncommon to explicitly express emotions in Finnish. Okay, I don't know the veracity of this, but the study was made in Finland, so they say that even Finnish speakers might prefer to say "I love you" in English because they don't have the right words in Finnish. They conclude, thus, the language a parent chooses to express their emotional state or discuss emotional situations can influence the emotional development of the child. Because if the child is told that they are loved explicitly, that supposedly has an effect on their emotional development. Okay, and this is, read it twice. This means that for example, if you force parents to not use their language to their children, with their children, that might have consequences. And indeed, that's something that the authors say. They say this research may be particularly useful in the development of intervention programs for immigrant families, helping intervention staff to be aware of how the use of different languages in various contexts can have an emotional impact. Okay, so if you tell a parent, remember those parents that we saw at the beginning of the course that had been advised to switch their linguistic choices in the context of the family, to talk to the children in a different language than the one that they wanted to use. Remember those parents? So they say they are proving, this research is kind of proving that to be careful with that, because it might have an impact on the relationship between the parent and the child, and even on the developmental, emotional, the developmental trajectory of the child. This is again a highly deterministic, linguistic deterministic idea of how the choice of language might affect the emotions of the speaker. Okay, I always like to remember that quote by Rosario Ferrer, who is a poet, that said, "I love to make love in Spanish. I've never been able to make love in English. In English, I feel puritanical." And she's perfectly bilingual in both English and Spanish, but it makes a difference to her to express emotions in one language versus the other. Okay, so it goes beyond cognitive, purely intelligence, the influence that language can have on multilingual, the choice of language might have in multilingual speakers or multilingual people. It might be that it makes an emotional impact more than anything. Okay, now other studies have been made on these hypotheses that multilinguals might be better at taking different perspective from theirs, because they are used to switch from one worldview to another. Okay, so there were recent experiments on perspective taking and communication with babies and young toddlers. So they were asked this simple task. So you have an adult and you have a child, and then you have three cars. You have a big car and a medium car and a small car. And the child can see all of three cars and is asked which one is bigger, and the child points out the biggest one, and which one is smallest, and the child points out at the little car. Okay, and then an adult, before an adult comes, actually, some kind of screen is put up between the smallest of the cars and the other two. Okay, so the child is explained, just in case, that the person at the other side of the screen can only see the other two cars, the ones at that side of the screen, and the child can see all three, right? But it's not the other way. So when the adult comes, the adult is that just came in, asks the children which car is the smallest. And of course, the child, if the child can only take their point of view, they would say is the little car is the smallest, because in absolute terms, in the perception of the child, that's the smallest car. But if the child takes into account that the adult is having a different perspective and it can only see the biggest car and the medium car, the child would say, well, for that adult, the smallest car is the medium car. Okay? So what they put that task to the children, and you have the link of the experiment in the slides that you can click from the PowerPoint slides. And what they found is that bilingual children were better at communication, because they are better in adapting the perspective to that of their interlocutor. So they did better, so to speak, at adapting their judgment to the perspective of the adults ignoring their own perspective. Okay, they go on to relate their findings, these authors, with another experiment in which it was found that bilingual babies were better at social skills because they were better at gaze shifting in interaction. So they were better at identifying who was speaking in a particular language in experimental situation. Okay, so because they are better at taking different perspectives, that made them better at communication. Okay, now another set of studies where target the relation between language and identity. As I said, this is not only about cognitive abilities in a strict sense, but also about other mental abilities or other properties, psychological properties of the individual. So it is collected across a variety of contexts that a speaker says, I am what I speak. That means the identity. So what are you? Well, I am English because I speak English, and so on and so forth, right? So could it be that language affects this kind of personality, this identity? That is the target of a bunch of studies. So, for example, do people who speak two languages command two personalities? If they speak two languages and they adapt their personality to their languages, could it be that they have multiple personalities? So the conclusion seems to be that to the extent that our social personalities are expressed through our verbal interactions, for example, one thing we know, that limited language proficiency can interfere with presentation of the speaker's image. I always put myself, if you want, as an example when I am speaking Dutch, because my Dutch is still not as good as it should be by having been living in this country for a number of years. I am presenting myself as deficient in some way, and this deficiency in language proficiency, I can notice many times that is perceived as a deficiency in my personality, something like that. One day I was making some photocopies in the department, and then a colleague came and started talking to me in Dutch, and I was trying to explain to them that I still had a while to go before they could use the photocopy machine because I was making the photocopies myself. So if they wanted to come back later, so to speak. So I thought I was being considerate. Now I was trying to use my Dutch because I thought that was being the respectful thing to do. Since I live in the Netherlands, now I had difficulty, and then the colleague said like, it's just that when you don't know the language, it's like you are a child all over again. And I found that very annoying because no, I'm not a child just because I'm not able to use the language at an adult level, right? I'm still an adult. I'm an adult with adult perception of the world, with adult personality, etc. That I'm trying to talk, and it looks phenomenologically to you. It looks from the outside that I am being a child, but I'm not being a child. I am a perfectly able adult. So of course that might modify my behavior. I might choose in the future not to use a language that I'm proficient in, because I will be judged according to that proficiency, and I will be judged as for my personality and my intelligence and my abilities, and not only the conclusions will not only be for my linguistic abilities. Okay. So to the extent that our social personalities are expressed through our verbal interactions, your identity might be affected by your language proficiency. Okay, how about the personality? The personality, if we think that multilingualism leads to multiple identities and multiple personality, this is a very deterministic approach. Again, Sapir-Whorf echoes sound here, and for multilinguals, it would mean that for language choice is linked to attitudes and beliefs associated to the identities of the speakers. I might choose my language eventually because they present myself the language that I choose presents myself with certain beliefs, either mine or my interlocutor, okay? And that might determine language choice because there is a determination there. Now, it's true that identities then don't come with the individual, but are situational and subjective constructions. So I might present myself in one context as a certain kind of person, having certain properties, and I might use language to express that because I might have actually the ability, if I speak different languages, to construct my persona in different ways to be different people. Okay, language provides the linguistic means through which identities are constructed and negotiated, and that is very important. So a multilingual person might have more opportunities to develop different parts of themselves insofar as those are expressed in different languages in different contexts. And this, remember that languaging thing that was so important. If you want to present the whole of you, it might be necessary that you mobilize all of your linguistic repertoire, or you are never able to express the whole of you. Okay, so that might be another impact than that being multilingual has on your psychological existence. Okay, so now I'm going to give you a whole conclusion in this video, which is the last of the series and the last of the course, so that we kind of wrap up on everything that we have seen. So the first thing is that bilingual children are not more intelligent as a global category. Okay, so whenever you see that in newspapers, in magazines, in trendy books, and so forth, be wary of what it means. Whenever you see that, you are now equipped to qualify it in a way that you weren't before, I hope. So the primary difference between multilinguals and monolinguals is perhaps that some types of cognitive processes, those to do with selective attention and perspective taking, mature more rapidly in bilinguals, and that has been seen by now to be the difference often by about 1 year. Okay. It might be, and it would be interesting to have an answer to the question of whether the differences carry on to adulthood. A lot has been said, and some studies had a lot of impact in the role that being multilingual had on the manifestation of Alzheimer's and other dementia effects on the brain, right? So it's not that the being multilingual prevents the illness to develop. If you develop dementia, if you develop Alzheimer's, your brain is affected at the physical level, but it might be that multilingualism and other cognitive other exercises, such as being able to play an instrument or being a chess player and so on, it might be that give your brain an extra edge for this cognitive reserve that we talked about. So it might be that makes you more able to cope with the symptoms of the illness. So you manifest the illness a little even later in the time. Okay, you have read that those studies are still to be confirmed, and we need to know more about it, but it would be very interesting to know whether that's the case. Now, none of the research has ever found a blanket advantage for bilinguals on all of the tasks. It is normally confined to certain tasks. They are better at doing this, doing that, and sometimes to certain parts of certain tasks. Experiments are rarely replicable because the population is so different, and because the conditions in which they are made are so different. So be careful with that. When you have scientific claims on experiments that have not been replicated in a proper way, then it's almost like the claim is not scientific, because replication is at the core of scientific inquiry. Okay. Bilingual subjects are poorly controlled for. That's another criticism that has been made. You have the reading for this week that explains that in the continuum of bilingualism, there's not always a control to where the subjects are, and the interpretation of results is either grossly exaggerated or skewed, it has been said, because there were some statistical glitches in the computation. That's another criticism that has been put forth. And in general, keep in mind that bilinguals are not more intelligent. They just do better under some conditions. So it might be that they have different approaches to solving some problems, etc. But that doesn't make them more intelligence. This is the same thing that you get when you do comparative cognition across species, right? You might encounter that one species does something better than another species. That does not mean that one species is more evolved than the other species. Does not mean that one species is smarter than other species. It just means that some species are better at some tasks, right? So for the same way, it might be that some multilinguals are better at some processes, or that they do things differently, but that does not mean that they are more intelligent, right? So that claim is just doesn't have, it is very vacuous. It doesn't really have any content. Okay. So the worldview available to someone who moves easily through languages and cultures is necessarily different from that of someone confined to a single perspective. Okay, that can be said. Yeah, of course, you have a different experience of life if you have more languages. It gives you access to different kinds of information, to different points of view, to different people, to different contexts, and that is going to be different from not having that. Okay, so multilingualism might not be the only way to achieve these different exposure to different experiences, but it's certainly one way to achieve it, and that seems to make a difference in life experiences and in how, you know, things like flexibility and how much you question yourself and how much you develop parts of you that you wouldn't have developed if you hadn't questioned them, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that might make a difference. Now, for final conclusion, I'm going to make an extra video because this one is already quite long.